As we begin Chapter 5, we're going to be looking at environmental scanning. And what we're talking about here is the whole process that you and I as a marketing manager have to go through to assess what the competitive environment is like, to determine what the world around us is like before we can begin to put together our market mix. We think about putting together this market mix, and again, it's somewhat like what we talk about in the military, where you do a reconnaissance mission. In the old days, they would send a scout out, and he would check the geography, the terrain, look to see where the enemy was, what kind of backups they had, what kind of armaments they had. Then I think we went to planes that would fly over, and probably now we use drones, but the concept is still the same. Before you go into the marketplace, you need to do a flyover. And this is a very simple target. Okay, we look at this and we see in the center is a bullseye and a set of concentric rings. It's very important to understand that when a marketing manager picks a target market, with that target market come these constraining rings. You don't get a square, you don't get an ellipse, you don't get triangles. It's kind of all squished in here. And what you have in the middle is the target market. What you have on the outside are two sets of constraints. We'll elaborate on those in a minute. The macro environment, the world at large, the micro environment, the industry in which you operate. And in between here, between the target market and the two macro and micro environmental uncontrollables, is the only thing that the marketing manager has to deal with, and that's the 4 Ps. Now, generally when we talk to you about picking a target market, and we'll talk a lot more about that as we get to Chapter 9 and look at how we segment, target, and position a product. And once you pick that bullseye, with that comes a set of very distinct consumer behaviors and a set of constraints. Let me give you an example here. Let's say, for instance, we were in the athletic shoe market. When I pick within that athletic shoe market, we're selling some kind of sneakers. When I pick a target market, that is semi-controllable. I get to pick which portion of the market in totality do I want to target. But switching it is not that easy once we've determined that this is the market we're looking at. Now, I will later on in a couple of classes, I'll show you a video of a company that you all know very well, you're all very familiar with, that changed its target market sometime back in the 1950s or 1960s, and it will be shocking to you. That is pretty unusual that a company is able to do that. Here's the case in point. Let's say, and that of course is me working out. This girl is working out in the gym and she's no slacker. Okay, she works hard. She's there lifting these heavy things. She's pushing hard. When she goes to buy these athletic shoes, she has very specific needs in what she wants from those shoes. She probably sweats a lot. They probably wear out a lot. She needs a lot of support. So if I'm an athletic shoe manufacturer and I'm targeting somebody like her, that's very different from targeting these ladies. They have very different sets of constraints. I don't think they sweat their sneakers and rot the leather. They may be very loyal. In fact, this is kind of a Reebok market. If you have grandmas who are exercising and grandpas, let's not be sexist here, grandma and grandpa, who do their exercises in a chair. But they're a very different market from that very energetic, athletic lady. Again, a very loyal market. In fact, Reebok was pretty astute in selecting this group of people because when they find a pair of sneakers they like, they're not constantly looking for a new fashion. In fact, if the pair that they like, the style that they like goes on sale at Macy's or Target or wherever, they may go out and buy a pair, take the box, put it on the shelf in their closet, and wait till the pair that they have wears out. But again, the difference is, if you are originally designed to be the aggressive, the Nike of the world, you can't easily switch to the grandmas and become the Reebok. And that's why we say it's a semi-controllable variable. Now, let's look at the outside. And we're going to spend a long time looking at these two sets of factors, the macro environment and the micro environment. Again, the macro environment is the marketplace at large. This is what the entire market analysis and SWOT analysis that you and I are going to do, this is where it all sits. So it's going to include things that affect every single company, every single consumer, differently, but it will affect everyone. The micro environment is the industry in which you compete. And this, of course, is kind of sitting inside the macro environment. And then squished in between are the 4 Ps. This is the only controllable set of factors to the marketing manager. The target market is, again, semi-controllable. The 4 elements that we will look at in the macro environment, the 4 elements that we will look at in the micro environment, we have no control over them as a marketing manager. All we can do is react to them, respond to them. But what we do have control over are the 4 Ps. So you think about this, again, kind of think about the whole picture of the target, and the market mix is kind of pushed from the inside out by the target market and what that unique consumer behavior is. Grandma sitting in a chair working out, or the very energetic, hardworking, going for the burn kind of woman. And it is at the same time getting constrained by the outside environment, the market environment. There is a part of this whole process I wish I could ensure that I could teach you perfectly. Some of you are better at it than others. Some of you can get better at it than others. This is really the key to great success. I can't turn any of you into Walt Disney or a Steve Jobs or a Jeff Bezos. These are people who have an amazing ability to scan the environment, to do competitive intelligence. They're constantly watching, and they're beginning to see things that the rest of us don't necessarily see in quite the same way. Steve Jobs, the chairman, founder of Apple, who's now gone, we always used to describe him as being able to see what you and I as consumers wanted long before we had any idea what we needed. Let me just give you a couple of examples of how the marketplace changes and how you have to be alert. You cannot be sitting looking at your Facebook and what your friends are doing 4 hours a day. You have to pay attention to what's going on in the world. So once upon a time, we had a market where pretty much everybody used a watch. I would bet if I ask all of those of you listening to this lecture, how many of you use a watch? It's about a 10% that use watches. And of those 10%, some of you, it's really not to tell time, because after all, our cell phones are always much better, much more accurate at telling time. This, by the way, is my cell phone. You can tell the cell phone cover there. This is quite different from the way that it used to be. Many years ago, virtually every young person, when they graduated from high school, so long as their family could afford it, got a watch for a graduation gift. They did not all get a Rolex watch because not many people can afford that. But the thinking was that once you graduated from high school, you were 18 years old, and now you were grown up and you had to be responsible for time on your own. Today, is there a market for watches? It's kind of questionable. We might look at some other markets that have changed. The travel industry. Once upon a time, there were tons and tons of travel agents. If you wanted to take a trip, you had to go to a travel agency. You didn't necessarily have to make an appointment, but an appointment might have helped. And you came in usually between 9 and 5, maybe 9 and 6, and said, I want to take a trip to Alaska, and I want to go on these days. And the travel agent would find the cruise ship or find the airlines and the hotels and the trips that you wanted to do. They would take their cut. They kind of told you what you were going to do. I think most of us today, if we were going to take a trip, we sit down, we type in Expedia or Travelocity or Kayak or Trivago or one of the websites, and we just kind of book it ourselves. We have tremendous control, and a lot of travel agents have gone by the wayside. Another industry that is losing a lot of employees is the real estate industry. If you are looking at real estate and you're in commercial real estate, we still need a lot of realtors in commercial real estate because commercial real estate is pretty complicated. But relative to the number of people that we needed for residential real estate, no, not very much at all. And I honestly can't remember if Zillow was created by Expedia or Travelocity. I kind of think it was Expedia. After they had revolutionized the travel industry, they said, why don't we do the same with real estate? Now, if you've never heard of Zillow, even if you're not looking for a house, Google it, go check it out. It is pretty amazing. Let's say that we have found this house on Calle Pasado, and this is not live, so I can't click on it. It's giving me the comps, the comparable values of all the houses around. I can click on it and I can zoom in. In many cases, people, when they list their house on Zillow, actually walk through the house and take pictures of it. There are some people who have little drone cameras that fly around and take pictures. And so, unlike the way it was in the old days, where you might visit with with a real estate agent and have to jump in and out of their car and visit 12 different houses and kind of lose track of where they all were, what you do now is you zoom in on all of these and narrow it down to maybe two, go and visit the two that look the most rewarding, and make your decision from there. Another industry, and I don't suspect a lot of you are looking to be firefighters, but you might have friends or family who would love to be a firefighter. And if you know anyone who's trying to become a firefighter, they'll tell you it is really tough because the market for firefighters is just shrinking, shrinking, shrinking. We still need firefighters for wilderness fires, for wildfires when we have national parks and vast amounts of California burning in the summertime from our droughts. But urban fires, we don't really need firefighters. In fact, one of the reasons why these guys, the EMTs, are part of the fire department is to help justify keeping the fire department open. We've had a lot of changes in the industry. We have tremendous technology. The firefighting technology is great, and so we have a lot more equipment and technology than people. It's a very risky job. It's a very difficult job. We also have much better building materials. In the old days, people had shake roofs and they'd have a fire in their fireplace and one spark would come out the fireplace or out the chimney and land on their roof and the whole house went up. And probably, thank goodness, we don't have so many idiots smoking in bed. When I was a kid, and still a lot of people smoked, the number one reason why people's houses caught on fire was because they went to bed smoking and fell asleep. An industry that I think is one that you should really, really pay attention to and take a lesson from. And try to think like people in this industry. Watch the evolution that we have experienced in books and newspapers. Not that books are completely gone. There's still a lot of writers. Newspapers are probably a lot closer to being gone, although you can get the newspapers online. Once upon a time, a bookstore would be owned by a single person or a mom and pop, a couple who love to read. But a bookstore is a very difficult thing to manage because you need a lot of titles. You kind of need 10,000 different titles. You can't have 10,000 copies of 10 books. You need to have maybe 3 copies and maybe 50 copies of a bestseller, maybe 3 copies of some of the classics, because if a person comes into the bookstore, they assume that they can find that book. Well, somewhere in the 1970s or 80s, along came companies like Borders and B. Dalton and Bookstar. And these guys got the bright idea that they could be much more efficient than the small mom and pop bookstore. They could buy direct from the publisher. They could sell the books to you a lot more inexpensively. But as we know, a lot of even these big bookstores have gone by the wayside. And part of the reason for that, and I know you all notice now the smile connecting A to Z, is companies like Amazon. Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, actually originally was a financial planner. In the early days of the internet, they had a client, his company had a client that wanted to know, well, what kind of product might be able to be sold on the internet? Bezos and a couple of other people worked on the project, and they came back and they said to the client, books. Because you could go online and you could pick the book. You don't have to pick a book up. You don't have to touch it. You don't have to try it on. And if we could keep them in a warehouse, that was very cost effective, and then FedEx or UPS or USPS send them to you, and you get them in 2 or 3 days, it's almost as good as going to the local bookstore or going to Bookstore or Borders. They gave the client the information. The client thought it was stupid, and Bezos said, I don't think it's stupid. I think this is just the starting point for selling pretty much everything eventually online. Now, what I really respect about the Amazon company is they kept looking ahead. They went way out of the box, and they said, okay, we went from small mom and pop bookstores to large Borders, B. Dalton kinds of bookstores, to being able to sell you the book online and ship it to you, and you get the physical book in 2 or 3 days. What's our next competition? Our next competition is being able to electronically, digitally deliver the book. And this is the original Kindle. I actually had one of these. I think I'm on about my 10th Kindle by now. It's a very primitive kind of tablet, if you will. But what's interesting to me is this book selling online company went and had this thing developed so that they could deliver the books to you electronically. From there, the rest is history. Think about how you just ask Alexa, and Alexa can do pretty much everything for you, whether you're asking her the weather or you're having her call Uber, or your grandma, help, I've fallen and I can't get up. Now all grandma has to do is yell, Alexa, call 911, and off they come. It is amazing what that industry has done. Sometimes the change in one industry creates an opportunity or a threat, but in this case, an opportunity in another industry. Once upon a time when every household got the newspaper, and believe me, there was a time when every single household got the newspaper and people pored over the newspaper. Most of you have never sat down and actually read the big old black and white newspaper and got that horrible newsprint all over your hands. In those days, when you got a new puppy, you housebroke, you trained the dog with newspapers. People don't have newspapers anymore, so they go to the grocery store or Walmart or Target or Petco, and they buy puppy pads. It would not be possible to have ride-sharing apps if we didn't have some pretty sophisticated technology. Also, some cultural changes. Many years ago, sadly, people didn't really think too much about letting a person drink and drive. Thank goodness for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, who made us very aware that we really should speak up and say, hey, you've had too much to drink. You need to find another way home. Add to that the fact that millennials do not seem to love to drive the same way that Gen X and baby boomers and the silent generation did. We could not wait to gain our independence and drive. Millennials have sort of changed that and said, if somebody else can drive me, that's fine. And then along came companies like Lyft and Uber, which replaced this guy. And how scary was this guy when you called the taxi cab, you really were not sure what route they were going to take. You really weren't sure when he was going to show up and what he's going to look like and how well you can trust him and the amount of money you might pay to have that ride. These are industries that have been very insightful. One that will probably make some of you kind of annoyed with me is legal services. This is an industry that has undergone incredible change. And if you think you want to be a lawyer, you haven't done your homework, because there is no need for you. We are so over-lawyered in America, particularly in California. There have been some major, major changes in the legal profession. And I write many, many letters of recommendation for my students for graduate school. I've never written one for law school because I've always told the students I'm not really sure what lawyers do except live off of the problems of other people, and they don't really fix them. At least a psychiatrist helps to fix the problem. But one of the big changes has come in recent years where we have started outsourcing our legal activities. And the major place where this happens is India. It also occurs in the Philippines. Both of these countries have democratic legal systems that are pretty similar to ours. Both of them speak English fairly well. And what we're able to do is we are able to outsource. Now, if you came to me and you were being charged, I'm a lawyer and you're being charged of killing your wife, I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to collect all the information from you. And by the way, please don't tell me if you actually did kill your wife. The last thing a lawyer wants to know is if you actually are guilty. They want to defend you as if you are not guilty. We sit down, I take all the information, and I upload it to these people in India. They are going to do all my background work. They're the paralegals, they're the lawyers. A lawyer in California gets paid $295 an hour. A lawyer in India makes about $600 a month. So I can get a whole month's worth of work out of a really good lawyer in India for the same as 2 hours in California. So I send everything to them. They will, in many cases, even write up my script. Now, granted, when you, the criminal I'm defending, and I, the lawyer, have to go to court, I have to show up again. But probably I am now spending about 1/10 the amount of time with you that I used to. And these guys are actually preparing your case. When you look at the number of jobs for lawyers, 9 months after graduation, when they've passed the bar, it's declining, declining, declining. When you look at the states that are overstocked with lawyers, New York is the worst. California is next. The state that needs lawyers the most is Vermont. I'm not sure how many of you are dying to go there, but wait, there's more. Sounds like we're selling some kind of infomercial. There is a second thing that has changed the legal profession, and that's called LegalZoom. LegalZoom's been around almost 20 years now. It's responsible for starting the incorporation, the creation of somewhere on the order of 50% of the Inc. 100, the best new companies, entrepreneurial companies in America. Over 50% of them are started on LegalZoom. And if you don't know LegalZoom and you think of yourself as an entrepreneur, shame on you. Shame on you, okay? Because LegalZoom actually is a great place that you can go to for legal services. You can do almost everything here. And rather than going to the lawyer who's going to charge you almost $300 an hour, remember, lawyers, if they think about your case in the shower, they charge you for a part of an hour. I mean, they are absolute vultures when it comes to how they charge you. So if you go to LegalZoom, you can get your will written for about $100 and about half an hour to 40 minutes, as long as your will is relatively straightforward. You can even do your incorporation and simple patent and trademark. If you're creating a new pharmaceutical that you've been testing for 10 years, you're not going to go to LegalZoom, but the majority of companies do. And if you think, no, my will is too complicated and too important, I can't go to LegalZoom, I'm going to a lawyer, I promise you, you go in and sit down with a lawyer. They'll spend 30, 40 minutes with you collecting all your information. They'll write up your will. You'll come back 2 weeks later and they'll charge you for 10 hours of work. So you just paid about $3,000 for your will. If you had done it on LegalZoom, it would cost you about $100 and would take you about 30 minutes. Oh, but wait, there's one more thing. And that is 40% of the people who use LegalZoom are lawyers. If you go in and talk to a lawyer and they charge you $3,000 for developing your will, there's an extremely high probability they actually collected the data and did it through LegalZoom. So industries change. And what I'd like you guys to learn to do, and again, it's a hard thing to learn. You have to be a person who's out of the box, who's constantly scanning. Again, if you're spending incredible hours a day on your Facebook account, you are not scanning because you are in this very, very narrow field. You need to start paying attention to a lot of things. You need to read a lot of different sources. You need to listen to the news. I'm kind of a news junkie. You don't have to be as bad as I am. But you need to learn to be proactive, like Amazon is, not reactive. You don't wait till someone else does something and go, oh, hey, that was a good idea. I think I'll do that too. Instead, what you have to do is you have to be like Amazon and say, hey, Who's our next competitor? Maybe it's us. That's brilliant. How do we analyze the macro environment? Well, the macro environment is that part of the marketplace that affects basically all buyers and sellers. Some to a greater or a lesser degree than others. But again, it's sort of this outer shell in which the whole marketplace operates. Some industries are more affected by social factors, some industries are more affected by technology, but basically everyone is affected. When we look at what is comprising the macro environment, generally it breaks down to four things. The first one is economic and demographic factors. The second one has to do with what are the rules and regulations, the political and the legal factors. The third one is the social and cultural factors. Then we look at technology. And even if you are in an industry that you might think is pretty low technology, you might be surprised to what extent technology actually really does shape a lot of what we can and cannot do. So to start with economic factors, let me give you a little sort of side roadmap here. Economic factors include economic issues and demographic issues, and you need to be aware of how the economics are changing, how the demographics are changing. As we look at economics, we look at both macro and microeconomics, and starting with the macroeconomics, in other words, these are the things that you learned in your macroeconomics class. Things like the effect of inflation, the effect of unemployment, recessions, depressions. What is the correlation between your industry, your business, and the macroeconomy? Some products, some services are in fact kind of neutral. Okay, some of them really are not all that directly correlated. These are probably less than 5% of all products and services that we sell. It might be something like milk. It might be something like disposable diapers. Okay, and what we mean by neutral is that if the economy increases, the economy is doing really, really well, do consumers consume more of it? I don't think so. Okay, I mean, just think about it personally. You have an 18-month-old and you have been earning $100,000 a year. You get a $50,000 raise. Congratulations, by the way, that's a pretty good raise. You go home and you say to your wife, hey, man, we got 50% more money. And you sit down with your 18-month-old and you go, hey, little Jimmy, guess what? We can buy 50% more Pampers, so just whoop it up. No. Pampers are pretty much neutral, just like milk is pretty much neutral. The majority of products and services that we market are actually positively correlated. The vast majority are very directly tied to the economy. I don't mean a perfect 1.0 correlation, but the vast majority of products and services go up in sales when the economy does well. They go down in sales when the economy does poorly. Okay, at that point, your brand does poorly. And certainly one of the industries that is most directly tied to upswings and downswings in the economy in a positive manner. Okay, positive again, meaning economy goes up, sales of homes go up, and related products for homes. The economy goes down, and if you recall what the housing market was like in 2008, 2009, and 2010, you did not want to be a real estate agent in those days because nothing was selling. Certainly vacations are very positively correlated. People are much more likely to take a trip and perhaps like the Griswolds get the lovely berets. I can never stop laughing about them throwing the beret off the top of the Eiffel Tower. Sad as it was for the poor puppy. Vacations are very positively correlated. But there is a small group of products, this is maybe 7 to 9%, that are negatively correlated. So again, I'm giving you rough estimates here. It's probably 85% are positively correlated. About 5% are neutral, and about 7 to 9% are negatively correlated. Remember what this means. It means that if the economy is doing well, your product is not. Your product sales are low, or your service sales are low. In contrast, if the economy is doing poorly, whoa, you're selling a lot of product. Okay, and there are products and services where this is the case. One that we kind of think of is this whole issue of the gold shops. In my whole life, until the recession of 2008, I had never seen shops like this popping up in malls everywhere. Little kiosks with signs out, "We buy gold, we buy your jewelry." And if you were really desperate and needed money, you could take in coins and you could take in gold and silver and jewels and apparently not get a very good amount of money for them. But if you were, again, really desperate, maybe that was in fact some source of money. Today, most of those are gone. The economy's doing a lot better. There's another whole category, and many of you are well aware of little luxuries. You may not have heard of them explained as little luxuries, but a little luxury means, okay, the economy's doing poorly. I can't afford a vacation. I can't afford to buy a new car. I can't afford the big things that I want, but I still kind of want to pamper myself. I used to work for Hershey. And when the recession hit in the fall of 2008, I said to my husband, we're buying more Hershey stock, and we did not regret it. Okay, you can't afford something big, but we can all treat ourselves with a $1 Hershey bar or a bag of Hershey Kisses. It also includes things like cigarettes. Cigarettes are considered little luxuries. They're somewhat negatively correlated with the economy. And it includes cheap liquor. It does not include really expensive liquor. It's almost more neutral. But cheap liquor, people don't have a lot of money, but they still feel like, okay, I need a beer, I need something else. Those little luxuries are also sometimes transferred into a few other things. And these two may be a little bit surprising and not ones that you thought about. One is dry cleaning. When we look at dry cleaning, we're looking at a service category that the econometricians actually track. They track to see when dry cleaning starts to take a nosedive, that means the economy's picking up. When dry cleaning starts to go up, that means the economy is going down. And I suspect several of you can think of why that's the case. One reason is you're out of a job and you're looking for a job, so you need to send your suit to the cleaners and get it pressed and very nicely tailored. The other reason is you just can't afford to go buy new clothes, so you take slightly better care of the clothes that you actually have. The other one is an MBA. And this one takes a little bit of explanation here. This is not an undergraduate degree, but an MBA. And I know when I say MBA to some of you, you look at me like, oh my God, Olson, just be quiet. I just want to be done. I just want this to be over with. I just want to get my undergraduate degree. Some of you will finish and you'll say, maybe I should go back to school. I kind of know more than some of the people I'm working for, but I don't have the degree. Thing to remember, we get more applications to the MBA program when the economy's bad. So your competition is a lot more. In 2010, which was the first year that we'd had a whole year cycle of people being able to apply for the MBA program, we had almost 200% the number of applications that we had had in 2008 before the really bad recession hit. What happens is that you get people who are out of a job, so they figure, well, while I'm out of a job, I might as well just go tack more money onto my student loans. I'll go get an MBA. Maybe by the time I finish the MBA, the economy will have picked up and I'll get a job. You also get people who are still employed. And you have, let's say you have 3 people, okay, they all work together, and I'm the boss. I come in and I say, economy's not doing so well, we have to let one of you go. So I let the middle one of you go. Now, the people who are still left, they're both looking at each other saying, okay, which one of us is going to go next? This is something we call layoff survivor syndrome. You begin to get very nervous about who's going to go next. And so what will often happen is you start looking for ways to differentiate yourself, make yourself more desirable. So maybe you apply for a part-time MBA. Stay on the job, but go to school part-time at night and on the weekends. And I tell you this because when you are applying for an MBA, and about 40% of you will eventually decide you do want an MBA, much better than a law degree, okay? Much, much better. Much more usable, only 2 years. Overall, just a heck of a lot better. And there's a lot more market for an MBA. But when you decide, don't apply when the economy's doing particularly poorly. because you will have a lot more competition. It will be a lot harder to get accepted. Let me give you a little test here and see if you can actually test yourself. Netflix. How did Netflix do? How does Netflix do? Is it positively or negatively correlated with the economy? This one is very negatively correlated. Netflix was able to take really big advantage of being a little luxury in 2008, 2009. People still wanted to see movies, they wanted entertainment, but they couldn't afford to go to the movie theater. Netflix was just coming online. In those days, it was the days before streaming. Kind of funny that it was called Netflix. We'll talk about that. It's an odd name for a company that started by mailing you the DVDs. But they were able to grow and take advantage of a bad economy. Ironically, do you guys remember a place called Blockbuster Video? Blockbuster Video took advantage of the previous recession and was able to capture people coming in to pick up the video, the videotape, and rent it as a little luxury. How about pet toys? Not even so much pet food, but pet toys. Positive, negative, neutral. Actually, this is kind of a trick question. I've done a fair amount of work with the pet industry, and there are two major components in the pet industry. I mean, there's actually a lot of subsegments, but there's two major components. There's a very large component in terms of the number of pets, dogs and cats that people have, and those animals are just part of the family. So if the economy is doing well, the pets get treated a little bit better. If the economy is not doing so well, the dog and cat don't get as many toys. There's another segment, which is a smaller number of pets, but a very large amount of money that is spent. And this is for pets that are surrogate children. Some of you maybe have grandparents, or maybe now even your parents are in this category. You look at how well the dog is treated, the cat is treated, and you think, geez, I wish I had been treated like that. This is a very interesting phenomena that we found. When the economy is bad, people who see their pet as a surrogate child actually lavish little luxuries on their pet. And the last one is Vegas. Positive, negative, neutral. Very positively correlated. If you went to Vegas in the spring of 2009, I think you could have probably stayed at the Venetian or the Bellagio for about $50 a night. There was nobody in Vegas. Economy picks up, rooms are packed.